Commander Vex'Thor of the Kashari Dominion stood before the holographic display, his 4 eyes narrowing with what could only be described as contempt. Before him floated a 3-dimensional image of a human weapon system, crude and mechanical. Nothing like the elegant plasma projectors his people had perfected over 3 millennia. This, he said, mandibles clicking in amusement, is what they call artillery. His subordinates gathered closer, their bioluminescent skin patterns flickering with shared mirth. The weapon before them was laughably simple. A tube, explosives, a projectile hurled through the air by controlled detonation. No sophisticated targeting matrices. No quantum-locked trajectory guidance, just force. They throw rocks, Junior Tactical Officer Kreen chittered. Evolved rocks, but rocks nonetheless. Vex'Thor's translator rendered his next words with perfect clarity according to our intelligence. Humans have been using variations of this weapon for over 700 of their years. 700 years, and they still haven't developed proper energy weapons. The briefing room filled with the Kashari equivalent of laughter. They had encountered the humans 3 cycles ago. These strange bipes from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Initial scans had been disappointing. Chemical propellants, kinetic weapons. Nuclear fission still used for power generation. They were centuries behind the galactic standard, perhaps millennia behind the Kashari themselves. And yet, these primitives had refused to acknowledge Dominion sovereignty over their system. Battlefleet 7 will demonstrate the folly of their defiance, Vex'Thor announced. We'll disable their orbital platforms, subjugate their military installation, and establish governance within 3 planetary rotations. The Dominion Council expects nothing less. What Vex'Thor didn't mention, what he barely allowed himself to consider, was the notation in the intelligence brief. The one marked with a crimson glyph, the symbol for extreme caution. It simply read, Human Homeworld Classification, Deathworld Prime. Gravity 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen concentration, dangerously high. Native predators, numerous and aggressive, recommend biological hazard protocols. He had dismissed it. Every species thought their homeworld was harsh. He should have paid attention. Battlefleet 7 dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system with the confidence of inevitable victory. 53 warships, each bristling with plasma cannons and quantum disruptors. They had conquered 17 systems with similar forces. This would be conquest number 18. Human vessels approaching, Sensor Officer Talrek reported. Configuration, unusual. They appear to be using chemical thrusters for maneuvering. Vex'Thor felt his confidence swell. Chemical thrusters in space combat. It was almost sad. Maintain formation, he ordered. Prepare to broadcast surrender terms. That's when the first human ship opened fire. Vex'Thor barely had time to process what he was seeing before the impacts began. No elegant particle beams, no cascading plasma waves. Just metal, thousands upon thousands of metal projectiles, each no larger than his smallest appendage, screaming through the void at velocities that made his sensors scream warnings. The lead Kashari destroyer simply came apart. Its shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, offered no resistance to solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectiles punched through armor plating like it wasn't there. And when they detonated, inside the hull, the secondary explosions tore the ship into glittering debris. Evasive action, Vex'Thor shouted, but 3 more ships were already dying, shredded by the humans' primitive weapons. Commander? Talrek's voice had lost all composure. They're firing missiles now. Chemical propellant. Missiles with what appears to be high-explosive warheads. How is this possible? How indeed? Energy shields were useless against matter. Point defense systems, calibrated for intercepting plasma bolts, couldn't track the sheer volume of incoming projectiles. And those warheads, crude as they were, hit with enough force to crack battleship armor. The humans weren't fighting like a civilized, spacefaring species. They were fighting like they were still on their death world, throwing rocks at predators. Except these rocks traveled at thousands of kilometers per second. Return fire, Vex'Thor ordered, but even as he spoke, he watched another 3 ships disappear from his tactical display. The human vessels were smaller, more maneuverable, and they fought with a viciousness that defied all tactical doctrine. They didn't maintain formation. They didn't follow predictable patterns. They swarmed like the prey animals of his homeworld, striking from multiple vectors, overwhelming his ships, targeting solutions. And then the human commander opened a channel. The face that appeared on Vex'Thor's screen was unsettling. Bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes like a predator, and an expression that the translator couldn't quite capture. something between determination and grim satisfaction. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet," the human said, her voice carrying an edge that transcended species. "You came to our home, you threatened our people. Now you're going to learn why we have a word called artillery." The channel closed and Vex'Thor's world became fire. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The humans didn't just have space-based kinetic weapons. They had prepared their entire system as a fortress. Hidden among the asteroids were railgun platforms, each capable of accelerating projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. On Luna, their primer satellite, mass drivers had been carved into the rocket itself, ready to hurl megatons of material at incoming threats. Mars hosted missile batteries that could saturate cubic kilometers of space with warheads. But the true nightmare began when the humans deployed what they called artillery. These weren't the primitive tubes Vex'Thor had mocked in his briefing. These were orbital weapons platforms, each carrying racks of what the humans designated as rods from God. Simple tungsten telephone poles dropped from orbit, accelerated by nothing more than gravity and simple thrusters. Simple, primitive, devastating. The first rod struck a Kashari heavy cruiser amidships. The kinetic energy of the impact was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The ship's entire midsection simply vaporized, and the expanding debris cloud destroyed 2 nearby frigates. "They're bombarding us with metal poles." Kreen screamed, his composure completely shattered. "How are we losing to metal poles?" Vex'Thor had no answer. His fleet was disintegrating, and they hadn't even reached Earth orbit yet. "All ships retreat to jump distance," he ordered, abandoning any pretense of maintaining the offensive. But the humans had studied their enemies well. Earth cyber warfare specialists had been probing Kashari systems since first contact. Now, as Battle Fleet 7 tried to flee, they found their faster-than-light drives refusing to initialize. Safety protocols were activating. Navigation computers were recalculating. Systems were failing in cascades that seemed almost organic. "We're locked out of our own systems," Tarek reported, his voice hollow with shock. "The humans are inside our networks." Admiral Chen's face appeared again on every screen in every ship simultaneously. "You wanted to conquer us with superior technology," she said. And now Vex'Thor could identify that expression. It was the look of a predator cornering its prey. "But you forgot something. We didn't develop our technology in a peaceful galaxy. We developed it while fighting each other. We've had 5,000 years to perfect the art of killing. You've had 3,000 years of peace." She leaned forward, and her next words were delivered with the certainty of absolute conviction. "We know war. It's in our bones, in our history, in our very DNA. And now you're going to learn what that means." The Battle of Seoul lasted 14 hours. When it ended, Battle Fleet 7 had been reduced to 7 ships, all critically damaged. Vex'Thor's flagship was a drifting hulk, life support failing, crew compartments venting atmosphere through dozens of hull breaches. Human Marines had boarded, not to massacre, which would have been almost merciful, but to take prisoners. Vex'Thor found himself face to face with his conquerors. And what terrified him most wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was the restraint. The human soldier standing before him, rifle at ready, wasn't gloating, wasn't celebrating, was simply professional, efficient, doing a job that clearly was routine for his species. "Commander Vex'Thor," the soldier said, pronunciation perfect despite the alien name. "You're being taken into custody under the laws of war. You'll be treated humanely and repatriated when hostilities cease." Humanely. They had just destroyed his fleet, but they would treat him humanely. Later, in a holding facility on Luna, Vex'Thor watched news feeds from across the galaxy. The Battle of Seoul was being called a massacre. The Kashari Dominion was in uproar. Other species were reevaluating their assumptions about humanity. And humans? They were already repairing the damage to their orbital infrastructure already, analyzing Kashari technology, already adapting it to their own uses. They learned. They adapted. They overcame. A human guard noticed him watching the feeds. "First time fighting humans?" The woman asked, not unkindly. Vex'Thor's translator struggled with his response, finally settling on a simple, "Yes." "Figured," she said. "You all make the same mistake. You see our weapons and think we're primitive. You see our tactics and think we're barbaric. But you know what you never see?" Vex'Thor waited. "You never see that we're from a world that's been trying to kill us since we climbed down from the trees. Every innovation, every weapon, every tactic we've developed has been tested in blood. Not in simulations, not in war games, in actual war, against each other, against our environment, against everything that wanted us dead. She stood, preparing to move on to her next duty. We call it artillery, because we've had centuries to perfect it. We have words for 1,000 different ways to kill, because we've needed all of them just to survive. And now that we're in space, she shook her head. Now we just have new targets. 6 cycles later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The topic, humanity's admission to the Council, and the immediate cessation of all hostile actions toward their systems. The vote was unanimous. Commander Vex'Thor, released as part of the peace accords, returned to his homeworld a different being. He wrote extensively about his experience, and his words were read across Dominion space. One passage became particularly famous. I have seen the humans at war, and I understand now why they have so many words for death. They don't glorify it. They don't revel in it. But they have studied it, refined it, perfected it with the dedication they bring to all their endeavors. They are not warriors despite being from a death world. They are warriors because of it. Every challenge their planet threw at them made them stronger. Every predator made them sharper. Every war taught them lessons they wrote in blood and remembered in bone. The galaxy thought the age of warfare had passed, that we had evolved beyond such primitiveness. We were wrong. We had simply forgotten what real warriors looked like. And when you remind yourself that these creatures, these humans, conquered their world without plasma weapons, without energy shields, without faster-than-light travel, when you remember that they achieved all of this while fighting each other with nothing but metal and explosives and sheer bloody-minded determination, that's when you understand. That's when you truly understand why they have a word called artillery and why you should never ever hear it fired in anger. Admiral Chen kept a copy of that passage in her office. Whenever diplomats from new species came to negotiate, whenever someone seemed to be evaluating humanity, military capabilities with that familiar glint of condescension, she would have them read it. It saved lives, potentially millions of them, because the galaxy had learned a lesson that Earth had written in the wreckage of Battlefleet 7, carved into the armor of destroyed warships and broadcast across every comm channel. Humans didn't invent the art of war. They perfected it, and they were very, very good at it. The stars had a new power to contend with. Not the oldest, not the wisest, but perhaps the most dangerous, because they carried their death world with them in every tactic, every strategy, every weapon system. They were humanity, and they had brought artillery to the stars.